Hello, hello, and welcome back to another episode of Slightly Burnt Toast. I'm your host, Samantha, and this time, you guys, we have the podcast all to ourselves. So, Elbert and I have basically chatted about the idea of sometimes having solo episodes in between our usual episodes where we have banter and we have like more of a conversation. And I think it's a nice mix. I don't know. You guys can let me know after this episode. But it's just nice to have the microphone all to myself because I can just really say whatever and that will be it. But I figure, it'd be really nice to just kind of sit down, have a little catch-up session with everybody. The feedback and just the love that we've gotten so far from the moment we've really just shared this podcast and kind of this new adventure that we're jumping on together has been so heartwarming. The amount of love and support that we've seen just really in person or on social has been so uplifting, you guys. We have so many conversations about, trying to do something fresh and new and something that's also healthy for our relationship. And I feel like this is it. Like I find that this is also almost like a therapy session for the two of us where we can just sit down and just really hash things out. And even though it's more of an entertainment, style versus couples sitting in therapy, et cetera. And therapy is so important and so healthy in my perspective. And so having a podcast and almost treating it like a therapy session at the same time, it's just really nice. So thank you so much for tuning in. And thank you so much for those of you who have decided to really just follow along and tune in and just listen to us banter. A lot of the topics that we talk about on this podcast is not anything that's too deep or too intense. We really wanted this podcast to be very uplifting and just fun. I have been basically just telling everyone that this is a podcast that you would turn on if you were cleaning the house and just really have it as background noise. And I stand by that. But for this episode, I wanted to share about my recent experience at New York Fashion Week. And it's less of like, hey, these are all the cool things that I got up to, but more so just getting real with you guys and really diving into the idea, the thought process, and just really anxiety. I know I just said that this wouldn't be really deep conversation. It's just more so just having chats with you guys and just hearing what you have also experienced as well, I feel like is very helpful to hear someone's perspective on things. And oh my God, you guys, Albert should be so thankful that I'm the guinea pig for this solo episode because one thing I realized when you are recording something solo, there's a lot of spit buildup. Like I am trying so hard to swallow my saliva and just like not start drooling because when you have a two-person podcast, there's always ebbs and flows. And when someone else talks, that's kind of the other person's cue to swallow their spit. But because it's just me in this episode, I'm like struggling. So if you hear some gurgling, I'm so sorry. So I had recently just gotten back from New York Fashion Week, and it has been a goal of mine to go to Fashion Week and really just be in the city during one of fashion's most exciting times of the year. So this past time I went solo, which was one of those things where I would tell people that, hey, this was totally part of the plan. But in reality, I always had the thought in the back of my head that like, hey, someone else will end up going with me and this actually wouldn't be a solo trip. So jokes on me, it ended up being truly a solo trip to New York City, which let me just be totally frank and honest. Until this most recent trip, I had been to New York maybe 3 or 4 times, and it's always with a friend, it's always with family, and never by myself. And so that coupled with the idea of shooting content by myself in New York City and also going to events by myself and just really navigating the city on my own was actually really anxiety inducing. And like, if I'm being completely honest, not part of my initial plan. Like I'm very optimistic as a person. I always look at things like, whatever will be, will be. Things will just end up working out no matter what. And so I had it kind of in my head that it's all good. I'll just book my tickets, I'll book my hotel, and someone will end up flying in with me. And isn't it funny that many a times we kind of build up certain expectations of how things are going to be, or we psych ourselves up to our detriment. Like I remember telling Albert, like, I will be fine. Like, he's so sweet. Like, he did want to come with me, but at the same time, like, logically, it just didn't make sense for us because I don't know and I didn't know what my schedule would be. Here's some just like background for you guys who are not in the influencer space or you're not looking, I guess, to go to New York Fashion Week at all, but it is very last minute. You would think an annual event that happens every single year with kind of recurring designers would have some sort of structure, or you would know what was happening ahead of time. No, that is not true. A lot of the events that I ended up getting invited to, etc., or the meetings that I had were so last minute, and everything literally came together, I think, a few days before I was going to fly in. So for my type A personality, is that the best combination of events? Probably not. But I was really just mentally and emotionally preparing myself to do this solo. So as time got closer to the actual day that I was going to fly, it became very apparent that like this was going to be a purely solo trip. And I guess I'm kind of glad that I mentally prepared myself that, hey, if this were to happen, I'm just going to have to be okay with taking my tripod and taking content on my own and just really using that thick skin that I've developed over a long period of time to be able to do so. Basically walk the walk and talk the talk. So yeah, as it became more apparent that this was actually going to be as solo can be, I'm not going to lie. Like I was excited for, finally doing something that I've been wanting to do. But at the same time, I was also kind of terrified. It's one of those things where it's like excited, terrified, those two emotions, I guess, could coexist. And I would tell people like, it's fine. We're good. I got it. But then I would like leading up to the day I was going to fly, like I had the worst sleep. And if you know me, like I'm someone who sleeps really well. Like I get my full 8 hours of beauty sleep. I fall asleep really fast. I sleep through the night. It's just, I rest really well basically. And for nights leading up to it, I just had these very vivid dreams of I guess things going wrong or like whatever could go wrong would go wrong kind of stuff and just had the worst sleep and actually developed a cold, you guys, towards the end, like when I got back from New York, but that's a story for another day. So in a nutshell, basically my body was also feeling the anxiety that I was kind of suppressing because I have never been, or like I never want to be somebody who would let fear be something that would stop me from doing something. Of course, this is very situation specific. Like if you are afraid of something that, warrants being afraid of, or if you are in a dangerous situation, then obviously don't do something because that's kind of your gut telling you like, hey, don't do the thing. Not a good idea. But this was kind of like a different type of fear. It was more of, I guess, an insecurity or an anxiousness that accompany, never really knowing how things will turn out. I've always had like an optimistic perspective, like I said, and it's one of those things where you don't really know until you know, and you really just hope for the best. That was kind of where I was at. And I mean, if you follow me on social, the trip went extremely well. But I did want to talk about, just really not just that fear and anxiety that a lot of us do or probably do experience in life, not just with traveling or just doing something new, but just, a lot of us do have some form of anxiety surrounding something that's important to us. And I think that feeling whatever you're feeling is something that's really healthy and really important, and having someone who can be your support system to talk through things and, to either A, support you or tell you it's going to be okay, is really important, not just, in life and in a relationship, but also in yourself to be able to be like, hey, like this is scary, but like it's scary because I haven't done it, or it's scary because I haven't prepared. And if you've done it before or you've had good preparation, then, it's just really preparing yourself to do the best that you can. But I'm going to take this as a very good segue into solo traveling, you guys, which is less deep and more fun. I I was actually, in the midst of the anxiety and the fear, and the excitement was also this really I don't really know how to describe it. It's like one of those feelings where you're like, oh, this is scary, but I'm so excited to do it. And specifically, this is just like outside of Fashion Week, it's more so just being able to travel solo because I've done it a handful of times, like when I came to Canada by myself and when I traveled to LA for the first time. And it was just, I kind of missed that feeling of solo travel. It is quite an interesting feeling where if you resonate with the idea of traveling solo as well, like it's fun. It can be lonely, but it's really how you think of it and it's fun. I had quite a few meals by myself, but I think I had a lot of enjoyment putting together a travel itinerary where all that mattered was really what I wanted to do. And I didn't have to wake up in the morning thinking, not really worrying about what someone else wanted to do, or like if someone thought an activity would be fun, or just like having to make random casual conversation as we're walking around and taking in the sights. I actually found that quite enjoyable just being alone with my own thoughts and really reconnecting with myself. And I think that's like the key word here is reconnecting with myself. And I don't know if this is a shared experience with a lot of you guys, or maybe it's just something that I'm experiencing personally, is that I kind of crave that feeling because I remember feeling very challenged and free when I moved to Canada by myself. And yes, it was quite scary and lonely, but I can't think of another time where I grew as much as I did when I was by myself figuring things out. And you really reconnect with yourself in the sense that sometimes there's just a lot of voices around and a lot of people, whether that's family or friends or your partner, providing input into perspectives or thoughts that you have, that sometimes your own thoughts kind of get lost in between. And so I thought it was really cool to be able to experience that again because I guess a lot of the travels that I've had since then have been with family, or when you're with, like when you're married and you're with a partner and you go on vacations together, yada yada, right? And so I was really excited to be like, this is great. I get to get work done, but I also get to have that feeling and that experience of really just sitting with myself and seeing, what actually do I like to do? What brings me joy? And like, what are my thought processes like when I'm exploring somewhere new? Like I had a day off in between meetings and events when I was in New York, where I specifically dedicated that day to go to the Met Museum. And it was, oh my God, you guys, it was the best time. Like I cannot describe that feeling of euphoria when I figured out the subway system. Like I get the concern from family sometimes where they're like, they just want to protect you and they're like, you like don't do it. Just take an Uber. You won't figure it out. And it doesn't come from, I guess, an angle of malice or anything. It's definitely from a perspective of care, but at the same time I feel like that really limits you sometimes, where the more you listen to that you're like, oh, okay, maybe it's better if I don't try this out. But when I figured out the subway system, you guys, well, when I say figure out, I say it very gently because I did take a wrong turn when I was in the subway, but that's okay because I didn't take the wrong train. And I remember when I got to Fifth Ave, I got out, I started walking to the Met, and I just like felt this euphoria inside. I think it was a mix of so many feelings. It was a mix of accomplishing something that I guess had told myself, or people told me that like, you couldn't do. That feeling of like anxiety, just being so silly, I guess. Like when I got to the museum, and I'm such a nerd, but okay, so I don't know if you're like me, but I don't actually read the descriptions at the museum, but I like being in it. I like being in a museum. I like being in places of culture, and I like looking at stuff. And although I don't necessarily grasp what I'm reading, I just like being in that environment. Anyway, it was a feeling of just like a lot of joy and gratefulness of being able to see how much I could push myself and then feeling I was worrying for nothing. Like everything turned out like how it was supposed to turn out. And that's honestly a belief of mine. And Albert and I don't necessarily share this particular way of thinking in terms of, things will turn out the way they turn out. But I truly do believe that with hard work, of course, and like a goal in mind, I feel like the more you do something, things will end up redirecting you the way it's supposed to go, right? And that's just something that I have found very comforting in life. But yeah, I thought it was a really, really fun and great experience. It was really, really cool to just kind of sit there and have a shitty sandwich that was way overpriced in the pouring rain outside and just sitting in the museum by myself. And I actually discovered, I kind of feel like I knew this about myself already, but I discovered that I really don't mind eating alone. I know that to some Asian cultures, and I say Asian cultures because I hear this a lot from my family, where it's like, why would you choose to eat by yourself? But I find it so relaxing. I find it really, I don't know, I just find it really nice just sitting and just having a meal by myself and people watching. People watching's fun, you guys. People watching's really fun, especially in New York City. The things that you see, it's very, very, very entertaining. And if you're tuning in and you're like, oh, I wish I was, like you. I wish I was, not someone who lets my fears come in the way of me doing something, or not someone who overthinks things, or, someone who enjoys having a meal by herself or enjoys solo traveling. I'm here to tell you that I am not born this way. When I was growing up, I was very timid. I was very scared of doing a lot of things. And it's definitely, in my perspective at least, a muscle that I choose every day to practice. The first time I solo traveled, it was so scary, so scary. And I think it also comes just with experience, right? I found that scary, yet after that experience, something that I wanted to continually develop and just get comfortable with. And I think that goes to show not just in travel, but just anything in life. I feel like confidence is a muscle that you need to continuously sharpen and continuously practice in order to be better at. Public speaking, one of my biggest fears when I was growing up, but something that I weirdly had a lot of practice with, is also, again, a muscle that really just needs to be sharpened over time. Funny story, you guys. When I was younger, I don't know if I've told a lot of you this if you're tuning in, but you know what? When I was younger, I thought I was going to be an illustrator. And I laugh because I used to win so many art competitions as a kid, just like with drawing contests or anything artsy, that after a while, I just stopped drawing because I just had other things to do. And now I can't even really draw like an apple properly. Like, it's so ugly. So there goes to show that if you stop practicing something, that muscle also deteriorates. So yeah, I guess I'm just here to tell you that if you are someone who feels like fear is stopping you, or there's definitely something that you want to develop more as a person, it's never too late. It's never too late to decide or make a decision. Like, today is the day that I choose to want this other thing for myself, to want this life, to want to be this person, and, choose to make an active decision with actions to accompany that. So yeah, never too late. I'm kind of sitting here also just thinking about other things that I want to talk about, because how often do I get a solo episode? It's so funny because Albert came out and he was like, "Are you recording without me?" And I'm like, "Yes, this is my solo episode." And he's like, "Oh, I guess you don't want to hang out with me." But anyway, very endearing. And so I'm trying to prolong this as much as I can, but I don't want to bore you either. And I also have, again, a lot of spit in my mouth. So I hope you really enjoyed this episode of Slightly Burnt Toast, a solo, just Sam, just one side of the toast that is semi-burnt because I'm missing my other half. And I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you have any thoughts, like we have an open conversation on Spotify, so definitely do leave your comments. Let us know what you think. And if there's any topics that you want to hear us talk about or disagree on, or just really dive a little bit deeper into, let us know too. And you can find us all over the socials. You can follow us on Slightly Burnt Toast. And if you want to see more fashion stuff from me, you can find me at Samantha Sito. Thanks for tuning in, you guys. I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.